Hey everyone, my name is Samuel Jones. I'm your spiritual BFF and your good Ju-Judy. And today, and I got my notes, so this is going to be a good video. Today, I wanted to talk about why black gay men in Dallas end up old and alone and how to change that. So before I go into the topic, I wanted to say thank you to everyone who watches my videos either here on Facebook or on YouTube. The people who send me messages and text me and let me know that you pulled something from the video, letting me know that it really helped you. Messages and feedback like that keep me going and it keeps me producing more. So I really appreciate that. Also, today is my sister's birthday. It is her something birthday today, and I know that she's going to be watching this later on, and I just want to say I love you so much, Katrina. Happy birthday. So let's get into the topic. So again, why black gay men in Dallas end up old and alone. Now, I know that the title sounds harsh, but I'm actually going to be coming from a place of compassion and understanding. So I'm going to break it up into three parts, or better yet, I'm going to be addressing it from three different positions. I am presenting the problem. I'm also going to be presenting my hypothesis as to why this is the problem, and I'm also going to propose a solution. So I'm not just out here complaining and pointing out things that's wrong without offering something that can help us all, because I'm a part of this community, I care. So another thing, black gays in Dallas, right? What's interesting about us black gays that I've noticed, us black same gender loving men, is that we are everywhere. It's like a black gay in Dallas can be a black gay in Atlanta in like 6 months, like real quick. It seems like there's hot spots like a underground railroad where we migrate to and travel to and become hubs for us. But I'm speaking to Dallas, but this really could be applied to other communities, I'm sure, because many of us that's here now are from other places, and many of us here now are going to be going to other places. But the first thing that I want to start with, I presented the problem, which is us ending up old and alone, right? Well, now I'm about to get into the hypothesis as to why I believe that's the case. So thing number one, I want to say that it's not our fault. It's not our fault, but it is unfortunately our responsibility. And where the damage really starts is trauma. What is interesting about trauma is that it freezes us at whatever developmental stage that trauma occurs. And when you're just black, you're already dealing with the traumas of racism. Quite a few of us deal with the trauma of poverty, but, which can come with food and shelter insecurity, which is quite traumatic. But when you throw being gay, when you throw being same gender loving on top of all of that, there's also the trauma of homophobia, which coincides with adolescence, which is usually where our sexual awakening takes place. And, what's interesting about adolescence is that when you look at the general broad stroke qualities of adolescence, what are they, right? They tend to be shallow, they tend to be moody, they tend to be very body focused, egotistical. That personality is really developing. Adolescents tend to be pure focused and highly sexual compared to earlier stages of development. And I'm wondering, based off of everything that I just listed, does any of that sound familiar? Does all of it sound familiar? Because if we look at it from broad strokes, some would even say a stereotypical, but I would like to say like a high-level perspective, I think that those same labels are applied to the black gay community quite often as well. And I believe it is because many of us have experienced significant trauma during our adolescence. Therefore, we're stuck there developmentally, and we're still working through those qualities that I just mentioned. So, this leads me into talking about something called Peter Pan syndrome, which is essentially exactly what it sounds like. Wanting to stay young forever. It's kind of like how Peter Pan in the movie never wanted to grow up. But for us, it's not that we don't want to be grown, but we really want to hold on to our youth. And the reason why is because once we become adults, that's when we first really get to start living our lives. Because one of the things that really set us back when it comes to developing healthy relationships that last is that while our straight counterparts, or even, our bisexual counterparts who prefer to be with opposite sexes, right? That entire group, they're able to have boyfriends and girlfriends. They're able to go to proms. They're able to go on dates. In general, society is set up to create an environment in which they can practice being in relationships before they become adults. So by the time they become adults, it's easier for them to form healthier connections. Whereas with us, with Black gays, during the entire period of time that our straight counterparts are practicing how to be in a relationship and receiving social validation for the people that they choose, we are still struggling internally, or we are hiding who we are for the safety of our physical selves, our emotional selves, and our spiritual selves. So what happens is that our adolescence doesn't really start in the way that I explained that it does for our straight counterparts until we are in an environment that becomes more controllable by us, which is usually achieved by adulthood. So what happens is that when we're adults, we can exhibit a lot of immature behavior relationally because in actuality, we're still learning. This is really our first time that we can be out and about openly in the world, and we're able to choose our partners and learn what it's like to be in a relationship and learn what we do like and what we don't like and how to, be the best version of ourselves as we do it as we go along. So we're in our 20s and 30s learning how to do relationships healthfully and correctly, whereas our straight counterparts who have already had a head start of at least 10 years on this, they are using these years to find their appropriate match, they pair up, and then they move on. Whereas with us, in our 20s and 30s, we're still trying to learn how relationships work, so we may not actually find someone suitable or want to settle down ourselves until we are much later in life. But remember, this isn't about chronological age, it's about developmental age and the way that these two things clash. So even though we may be chronologically older, if we haven't dealt with the traumas that froze us in adolescence, that's something we're still going to be working through no matter how old we actually are. So let me go back to my notes. Oh, another thing. Another disadvantage when it comes to this dynamic of being developmentally younger but chronologically older is that we end up making youthful mistakes with adults' consequences. So mistakes that we could have been making and should have been making, when we were teenagers and we just would have gotten a stern talking to or just a slap on the wrist, we can get locked up. We can lose our reputations because according to the world, they're going to be looking at us based off of our chronological age as opposed to our developmental age. And they're going to say, well, he's 45, he's 32. do whatever, as opposed to saying, well, he may look like that on the outside, but on the inside, he's actually 15 and he's still working some things out. And, guys, this can be so easy to miss, this piece right here, about how stunted we can be developmentally when it comes to forming relationships, because in so many other ways as a community we kill it. We're attractive, we're creative. If we're in business, you can't stop us. Like, we're usually very good at our jobs. We're talented in multiple ways. So when you have all of this evidence of being a functional adult that is operating at an appropriately, in an appropriate I'm getting tongue-tied. An adult that's acting right, it can be really easy to say, well, I have all of this evidence of why things are right, then, why would this thing be wrong? This person is choosing to behave badly in this area. This person is choosing to make mistakes in this area, because if they do all of this right, then that means that they should be able to do this right too. But that's not necessarily the case based off of everything that I've explained so far. Even though life is holistic, it can also be compartmentalized in that way as well. So what else do I have? Oh yeah, so I talked about Peter Pan syndrome. I talked about how, unfortunately, due to the way that things are just set up, we can make youthful mistakes with adult consequences. But, this also leads into the elders in our community. Now, this may be a little bit controversial, but I have to speak the truth as I see it. And if you disagree, let me know. But I really believe that behaviorally, many of the elders in our community are more like peers as opposed to role models because of that developmental plateau. So rather than trying to lead us or teach us, whereas, talking about the older interacting with the younger, instead of, teaching them, instead of leading them, they're fucking them. They're fucking them in literal and analogous ways. And the thing about it is that I'm not blaming them because of everything it is that I've expressed, but that's another reason why the overall development of our community has a hard time moving forward, is because those who have come before us aren't really moving forward either. They're frozen just like the rest of us. Now, remember, I said that I was going to be approaching this with compassion, and I said that this issue is not our fault. And even though when it comes to the older, younger dynamic, it can be predatory at times, and it can go both ways. And there are even cases where a person who's higher in gay years can take advantage of someone who just came out, They could be used to being in the life, so to speak, so they can take advantage and mislead someone who's new. So it's not just older in chronological years, but it can also be older in, the experience of being out and around. But I would like to mention that when it comes to the older gay men in our community, their adulthood was like in the 80s, it was in the 90s, and you have to keep in mind that this was the peak period of the HIV/AIDS epidemic. And speaking to them, listening to them, it was very common to have the belief set and attitude that, I'm not even going to make it to 30 years old and I'm 18. I'm not even going to make it to 25. I may not make it to next week, because things were so bad during that period of time. You would see someone one day and then the next day you wouldn't, and you find out that they died due to HIV/AIDS complications. So before we had things like PrEP, PEP, HIV tests, things like that, there was so much mystery surrounding what was happening with HIV/AIDS that it seemed like, opening your eyes, taking in a breath, and living another day was like Russian roulette. So keep in mind, your adulthood is during that period of time where the HIV/AIDS epidemic is at its peak, right? But somehow, even though you didn't think that you would, you've survived all the way up into 2020. You've made it. Well, the world is different now. Not only is HIV/AIDS less of a mystery and is much more manageable and is taken far more seriously, but the world culturally is different, especially the United States. In the 80s and 90s, putting it very plain, it was not nearly as okay as it is now to be gay and to be open and proud about it. So I can see how in a person within this intersection would look at life today as like a renaissance, a reboot, a restart, a new lease on life. And there are probably so many things that they never got to do, so many things that they never got to experience, and so much love that they never got to have or complete that they feel that they can now. So when it comes to choosing someone who's younger, I try to look at it through that lens, and I can see it. If anyone who considers themselves to be an older, Black, same-gender loving man in our community, please comment, give us some feedback. I'm interested in knowing what you're thinking, because this is my hypothesis. This is me looking at it from sometimes the inside out, but in your case, the outside in, and I'd like to know what you think about what it is that I had to say. So moving on, we're on page 2 of the notes now. So overall in our community, this all leads to a clash in our atmosphere. Essentially, you have on one hand an attitude that says, I don't have long on this earth, I want to live it up. And then on the other hand, you have an attitude that says, I desperately want love, to love and be loved, and I don't want to live the rest of my life alone. I don't want to die alone. And just all of that is coming together, and it creates a lot of tension. It creates a lot of fear and anxiety in the atmosphere. And that, in combination with the traumas that we've experienced, I believe that's the reason why we are so vulnerable to substance abuse. Let's see. Yes. So things like drugs, alcohol, even certain types of sex, it can be life-threatening if you're not applying it in a way that your eyes are open. You know, if all you know is that you feel bad and you can't put a label on it, you don't know why, you're just going to reach for whatever it is that is available to you to ease that pain. And the thing is that, and y'all, I am a graduate. I'm a proud graduate of Dare University. So me saying this, I'm definitely being unbiased. But when it comes to drugs and alcohol, they're not necessarily bad things, but it's the reason why you're using them and the degree in which you're using them. You know, is it to fill a void? Is it to, Lisa Fisher, ease the pain? Is there an unconscious use that's happening there that can lead to an unconscious fatal end? So I'm not telling you to not do the things that you do, but what I am saying is ask yourself why, so that you can be in control of what you're doing and why you're doing it. So this leads to the solution portion of this video, right? Here's the thing. Like, I'm gonna have a couple of nutshells, but just like we have a lot of medical advocacy for HIV/AIDS, we need to have a mental health component to that. And it needs to be larger or just as large as the medical aspect. And this is why I say this. Now, I'm not going to reveal where I worked here in Dallas. A lot of you know. But I was working with and smack dab in the middle of our demographic. Same gender loving men, Black, ages 18 to 35, right? And there are just certain patterns that I've seen, that I've noticed over and over again. And what I've seen is that when it comes to further averting the crisis of HIV/AIDS, when it comes to ending the epidemic, it's not about tools anymore. The only tool that we can have at this point that we don't is a vaccine. But we have multiple ways of preventing HIV/AIDS, even if it's freshly in your system. But I find that when it comes to HIV/AIDS awareness and advocacy, even though it tries to get to the behavioral aspect of our community, which is important, it focuses too much on the tools as opposed to the motivation behind the tools, actually getting someone to want to use the tools, right? Like I wrote it down, I said in a nutshell, it is because it remains a medical model focused on, I can't read my own handwriting, focusing on pharmaceuticals rather than the mental, emotional, and spiritual health component involved with them. You know, because the thing is, you can give me a PrEP pill, but if my mama don't love me, that's a bigger problem. Am I gonna have the motivation to continue on if a relationship that important is one that I can't get over? You know, you can tell me to use condoms all day long, but if I feel that the God that I believe in hates me, well, what's the point of living a good life if I'm going to end up in hell anyway? So when it comes to the HIV/AIDS advocacy and just work that goes into it, it has plateaued. I haven't seen anybody else say this, but it has. And the reason why I say that is because in every space that I've been in dealing with HIV/AIDS prevention, awareness, advocacy, the question is, how can we reach more people? How can we push this forward more? How can, we get to the point where either everyone is, I almost said vaccinated, whether everybody is either on some sort of PrEP or everyone is managing their status. Either way, you have a status either way, whether positive, negative, or unknown. There's been a big push to get people to manage their status, but my thing is that we have to get to the behind the scenes to get people to care about managing their status. And I believe that this movement will be plateaued until we tie in the mental, emotional, and spiritual aspects of being a part of our community. Because if we don't care to use the tools that we're given, then they may as well not even exist. And taking in this information and using it as a governmental agency, like let's say the CDC, you will know that they really care about us as a community if they listen to something like this, as opposed to just putting out the tools and saying, well, they can use them if they want to. If they don't, then it's on them. It goes much deeper than that. It's about our trauma. It's about our hearts. It's about our minds. It's about how we can love ourselves enough, or how we can feel valuable enough, or how we can feel supportive enough to use the tools that are available to us. So to overcome this hump when it comes to the epidemic, it's important to tie in the internal, not just the external. Kind of like they say, defund the police, right? Let's defund, or at least put more money into defunding the pharmaceutical aspect, or keeping that going the way it is, but emphasizing and really making a big deal that mental health matters. It's so important, because if your mind ain't right and if your spirit ain't right, well, everything corresponds to those things, so they won't be right either. So let me see if I have any other notes. Anything else? No, aside from the fact that I really appreciate y'all commenting. Please continue to do that. Give me your thoughts. I'm really curious about this. I was nervous to speak on this at first, but I felt like it was important, so I talked about it anyway. And also, I would really appreciate it if you shared this video with anyone you think could benefit from it. I run in a lot of mental health circles, and if you are a person who is in a mental health circle and you're like, well, I'm not Black, but I feel like this could be valuable for other professionals in mental health to know, share it. Share it. Please do. Or, just with your good Judy, who you have conversations like this with all the time. And I also want to remind you that I do have a website. If you want to learn more about me and what I do, you can go to myspiritualbff.com. If you don't have my Facebook, you can email me directly at myspiritualbff@gmail.com. And for all of the nonprofits watching out there, yes, I do public speaking engagements. Yes, I do panels. Yes, I host. Yes. Yes, I host, and not just in a grinder way. And yes, I'm also willing to be a consultant. So, all that being said, react to the video, share it, please comment and let me know what you think. And until next time, I'll see y'all later. Bye.